In this video, I'm going to tell you all about my favorite piece of music making equipment, which is my Roland FP60 digital piano. I'm going to tell you why I chose this model over other ones in Roland's lineup. I'm also going to explain some of its features that I think are underappreciated, especially for me when it comes to 80s music production. I'm also going to tell you why I have other MIDI controller keyboards in my studio and what I use them for. Now, I know a lot of professional musicians have full-size piano keyboards on their workstation desk. They might have it that pulls out on a drawer, or they'll actually have it on their desk. Personally, I don't like that because if it's on my desk, then it means the QWERTY keyboard and mouse need to be somewhere else, which is either just below the desk where it's not comfortable to use, or sort of over on a shelf further in front, which again isn't very comfortable. I like to have a keyboard that's big enough so that it's practical to use, but small enough so it fits on the desk just to the side, so that both this keyboard and my QWERTY keyboard and mouse are at the same height and easily accessible. Just a little bit about this keyboard on my desk. It's an Akai MPK249, 49 keys that feature aftertouch, so that is quite handy. It has a multitude of buttons, faders and knobs, so it's really good for controlling virtual synthesizers. The key action isn't great, it's okay. The keys are quite noisy, whilst the white keys are actually reasonably good for a semi-weighted synth key action. The black keys, the pivot point is a little too far forward. So if you press the black key sort of more than halfway along the length of the key, it's a little harder to press, which makes getting an even feel for each of the notes that you're playing a little bit more difficult. I still like this keyboard though because of all of its features. I like having it on my desk, it's just the right size. Now if we switch over to the other side of the room, you'll see we have the Roland FP60 digital piano, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But we have the MPK225 from Akai that sits just above it. Now, the reason that that smaller keyboard is there is simply because, being a digital piano, the Roland doesn't feature either a pitch bend control or a modulation wheel. So connecting both of those keyboards to the same MIDI channel inside Cubase gives me the best of both worlds. But let's come on to talk about my Roland FP60. You'll see it has 88 full-size piano action keys. They are really, really nice to play. I really like using them. And all of these buttons here are back illuminated with a little display. And it's nice to be able to choose different instruments really, really quickly. And some of those built-in sounds are actually really useful for 80s music production, especially some of the pad sounds and the digital piano sounds, EP sounds, which I'm going to come on to in just a second. But I'm going to give you a quick demo as to how just the piano sounds, so you can decide if it's what you like. There is an FP30, which sits below this one, and the FP90. Now, in actual fact, Roland have released newer models for each of those keyboards. They are now the FP30X, the FP60X, and the FP90X. And when it comes to this one in the middle of the range, the FP60, the X version is pretty much exactly the same digital piano. I think the only reason Roland released it was because originally the FP60 was overpriced. The amount that you had to pay extra over the FP30 didn't really make a lot of sense. So they've released the FP60X actually at a lower price point, but with the same features, and it just makes more sense. The FP30 and the FP60 share the exact same key action. The FP90 has a different key action, which is supposed to be Roland's more sophisticated upmarket key action. Personally, I actually prefer the weight of the FP60. I learned to play on a real piano when I was about 5 or 6 years old. So I've never really found any digital piano or MIDI controller with hammer action keys. I've never really found any of them to feel exactly the same as a real piano. But for me, the FP60's action is the closest that I've come to for my personal preference. The main reason I chose the FP60 over the FP30 was because the FP60 has a balanced line output for connecting to mixers or audio interfaces in a professional environment. The FP30 just has a headphone output. The FP60 has a much easier to use interface for accessing some of its other features, and it has more built-in sounds, which I'm going to come on to in just a second. I'm going to switch back to the overhead view, and you can see that there are a number of buttons across the top, and we can select different EP pianos. There's some digital string sounds, organ sounds, pad sounds, and then there's a bank of other instruments which are basically general MIDI sounds. Especially when it comes to creating 80s music, some of the pad sounds on this keyboard I use quite a lot. I'm just going to give you a flavour of what some of those sounds sound like. That's a really useful sound. AirPad. They're kind of really useful pad sounds for 80s music. Now, we can also blend the piano with some digital piano sounds, which was a popular tactic used by producers like David Foster. So I'm just going to show you what that sounds like. I'm going to put it onto dual voice so that we can have a digital piano and a second instrument underneath it. And these two faders here control the volume of each of those two parts. Let's try a bit of Chicago. And I think that is probably one of the FP60's most underutilized features. A lot of those sounds are really useful. There's far too many for me to go over in this video. But for creating sort of quick ideas with an 80s style sound, I really love it. And the piano sound in itself is really nice. I do tend to use it in a lot of my mixes. If you were to check out Chariots of Fire and some of the rock ballads like Alone, the FP60's featured all over those covers of mine. So you might want to check those out so you can get an idea of how it can be utilized. So one thing I don't like is, whilst you can get the FP60 to control virtual instruments inside the computer, you can't get the computer to control the FP60 and play its main piano sound. If you attempt to control the FP60 via a MIDI output from the computer, all you get access to is its general MIDI sounds. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe it's just a limitation of it being a digital piano as opposed to a synthesizer. Other than that, I think it's a really great instrument. I really like it. And would I recommend it? I think with the newer FP60X model that's now at a lower price, I would say definitely yes. Previously, I would have agreed that the FP60 was overpriced and probably not worth it, but the FP60X is much better for the money. So that's kind of my summary of my Roland FP60 digital piano. Probably my most favourite piece of music making equipment that I own. I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, do leave them in the comments down below and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in another video.